From the hidden corners of government files to eyewitness accounts of everyday people, dive deep into the mysteries of the galaxies. The Mutual UFO Network has been uncovering our galactic truth since 1969, and now we share that truth with you. Welcome to MUFON Contact Radio with your host Earl Grey Anderson, exclusively on the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. So buckle up, Buttercup, and join Earl on a voyage through the universe with MUFON Contact Radio.
Hello, how are you guys doing? Oh my, we've got a fantastic show today. I've got my dear friend, and who I believe has the most compelling and important UFO case that's out there, actually. Robert Salas, Commander Robert Salas. I'm going to read the little his little blurb here from the back of his book. He has a storied and honorable career here. But Robert Salas is a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy. He served 7 years on active duty. He worked as a weapons controller, flew target drones, commanded intercontinental ballistic missiles as a launch officer. He worked as an Air Force missile propulsion engineer on the Titan III program. From 1971 to 1973, he worked as a safety and reliability engineer for Martin-Marietta Aerospace and for Rockwell International, which was my mom's old client. He worked on the space shuttle design proposals there. And from 1974 until his retirement in 1995, he worked for the Federal Aviation Administration. In 2022, he testified at the Brazilian Senate's public hearing on UFOs. And I might add that more recently, he spoke at the AARO Congressional hearings on UFO transparency, both in 2022 and in 2023 and 2024, just less than 2 weeks ago. Let me read the second little bit here. Robert Salas witnessed firsthand a UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon, visiting and disabling nuclear missiles. He shares his experience as well as many other incidents of similar visits during the last 80 years that have been covered up. And that is the blurb I'm reading from Bob's book, UAP and the Nuclear Puzzle. This is the revised and new version. I'm proud to say I've got a nice inscribed copy here. I'm not going to read it because I'll get embarrassed, but it was a very nice inscription that Bob wrote in here. So we have a lot of things to talk about, a lot of ground to cover. So without further ado, let's bring on Bob Salas.
Hi, Earl. Great to see you again, my friend. Always good. We always have a good time. Happy to talk to you.
Hello there, Bob.
Can you hear me at all?
Now I can. Sometimes it's a little slow, you know, with the internet and everything right up front, but it seems to get better as we go along. How are you doing today?
Wonderful to be with you again, Earl. Every time we meet, I have a great time. Yeah, we're doing fine now that I got my internet back up and
we had our variety of hurdles to jump today. I mean, Bob's router went out, and he had to run out and buy a new router for his computer this morning in order to be able to do this. For myself, Lisa and I, my wife, we live in a condominium here in the West Valley, San Fernando Valley of Southern California, and upstairs of us, they're flipping the condominium. It's some Russian gentleman that bought it. Russian gentleman. I wonder if I'm going to have any new bugs or listeners here upstairs, but they were hammering in new carpet apparently, and so my wife had to go up there with her little translator on her iPhone, but they've kindly stopped. They've given us a little window here So that was very nice. So we're good. We're rolling. So Bob, I've known you for a while. Producer Bill, you might want to kick in the first couple of photos I gave you. We just had lunch a few days ago. This is you speaking as the keynote speaker at the 2024 MUFON Symposium in Dallas, Texas. And it was a fabulous lecture that Bob gave. I heard from quite a few people they thought that it was the best keynote speaker that we've ever had. And MUFON's been, doing this since 1969. So that's a lot of keynote speakers, but I kept hearing this was the best one. This is the flyer from when you last spoke to my Southern California MUFON group here. It was 2023, so I have to get you back soon. I've been talking with a couple of my colleagues. We want to have you back. This is from a few days ago. We met in Agora, California at the Sagebrush Cantina, which is supposed to be haunted. I didn't see any ghosts. There's Bob and I telling secrets about national security issues. Actually, we were probably talking about the salsa or something. And this is Bob speaking in 2018 when we very first met. That was the first time I met you, Bob. You were we had you speak to Southern California MUFON in our old location with Dr. Pierre Petit, Jean-Pierre Petit, French astrophysicist, and it was a pretty heady talk. There we all are. Myself on the right, Dr. Petit on your left, my old state director and dear friend Jeff Krause on the far left. And there you are. And that was the first time I ever met you. This is more recent. This is when you spoke in October of 23. And that we meet in a little a music concert venue. So we've got pictures of Odetta and Peter, Paul, and Mary behind you. And there we are. After the meeting, we like to get together and people do dinner. This was another meeting before you were actually the keynote speaker, but Bob actually comes out to my meetings sometimes, and I always have to say we have UFO royalty here tonight because that is you, Bob. We all think of you that way, yeah. And I wasn't pulling your chain when I said that I believe you're the most important UFO witness in the world right now.
Thank you for saying that. Well, I'll let that lie. It's your comment. I'm not going.
Well, you don't have to. I
would like to say something about Dr. Jean-Pierre Petit.
Yes,
he is an incredible scientist. I don't know if you know this, but he did some groundbreaking work in magnetohydrodynamics, or MHD, where he was able to show that the boundary layer can be smooth going through Mach 1. As when pilots fly through Mach 1, a boundary layer builds up, and that's where sometimes you hear this boom as a plane is going through through Mach 1. But his research actually helped develop hypersonic craft, which are now in use and operational both by the Russians and the U.S. But I think some of his best work is his work on establishing a new ideas about how the cosmos works. In other words, why is it we have galaxy groupings, and then in other places in the cosmos, there's a complete void of galaxies. But I would simply, just to keep this brief, recommend anybody who is interested in astrophysics and these concepts which are groundbreaking about the universe, should go to his YouTube page. That's Jean-Pierre Petit, and you'll find just a treasure trove of information about these subjects.
He's a cartoonist too. We all went out for dinner afterwards, and he was doing these just kind of on the spot cartoons, and they were funny. He had like a picture of a mouse trap coming down on a UFO. It's like UFO trap, and he was just like handing them around the table, which was it's nice to see. You know, it's like the left and the right brain are both working with that.
Yeah, a great sense of humor.
Delightful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Okay.
So, well, Bob, I would like to, might as well get right down to the grist here. I would love it if you would just kind of walk us through back in 1967. You were the commander of an ICBM base. You were actually in the capsule underground, where they had to pump oxygen. They had the computer systems and everything separate from the missiles. And the missiles had, I believe, how many inches of insulation against like an electromagnetic pulse? I think it was 3 inches of insulation that you said in your book, to protect them from being disabled or disarmed. I mean, this is our nation's still what we consider our protection and our arsenal against other nations doing a nuclear attack and putting us out of business. But anyway, I would love for you to just kind of go from boo when things were interesting.
You bet. I'll run through it. This may be a little abbreviated, but of course I've got those books, and I've got a website, spiralgalaxy.org, where I've got much of my evidence that backs up the story, and the other story, which is the Echo flight incident. These were 2 separate incidents. One happened about 8 days prior to my own, and that was March 16th, 1967. My incident occurred March 24th, 1967. On that evening, I was in charge of the facility during the evening because my commander and I took rest breaks. So there were 2 of us in an underground capsule, about 60 feet underground. We were locked in until we really relieved by another crew, which would happen the next day. The first thing that happened, I got a phone call from my topside guard. We had 6 guards up there, and their duties were included securing the facility upstairs, and also going out and looking after the security of the launch facilities where the missiles are actually located. Ours was kind of a central hub. That capsule underground was a central hub for the missiles that were located in something like a ring around that area, about a mile or 2 away from where we were. But we had also security alarm detectors on those facilities. Obviously, we wanted to keep the missiles themselves secure, and we could monitor them in that way from our location underground. They had no ability upstairs to affect anything having to do with the missiles. They were simply guards up there. I say simply, that's an important job, of course. And the flight security controller was the one that called me sometime in the evening of March 24th. And basically, this is what he told me. He said, "Sir, we've been seeing strange lights flying over our facility." This was Oscar Flight Launch Control Facility. And some of these words are going to sound familiar because you heard them from other pilots. But he said they are flying very erratically, going at very high speeds, stopping on a dime, reversing course, making 90-degree turns, and there is no engine noise. We can't hear any engine noise. He said they are not aircraft as I know them. Well, this is unusual. I even said, "You mean like UFOs?" And the reason I said that is because we had in Great Falls, Montana, where we were based at Malmstrom, we had sightings, and they were reported in the newspapers, and they had been reported for at least a couple of weeks prior to this date. By ordinary citizens, farmers, you have it, and they would report these strange lights to the local police and sheriffs. So I mentioned that. "You mean like UFOs?" He said, "Well, sir, I can't explain it. All I can tell you is they are not aircraft because of what the maneuvers they were doing." Now, we've heard the same kind of comment from those Navy pilots, Tic Tac pilots, that these objects were doing things that aircraft simply cannot do, and other witnesses. But I didn't know what to say. I was not really interested in the subject of UFOs at that time. I honestly was not interested. I just thought people were being a little weird by reporting lights in the sky. But anyway, I said thank you for the report. This was, by the way, all our communications with our guards were very, let's say, formal military type communications. We didn't really, shoot just chat, call each other to chat or talk about sports or anything else. These were all professional communications. So I respected that. I said, thank you. And I said, let me know if something else happens with these lights. And so I hung up the phone, and about 5 minutes or so later, he calls back. And this time he's screaming into the phone. He's obviously frightened. I can tell by his voice. He's babbling. He's not making much sense. I calmed him down. Finally, I got him to say he's got all the guards with their rifles drawn, pointed at this glowing reddish orange object hovering above the front gate. Now we have a front gate is, I don't know if you've got a sketch of that, Earl, that you want to show.
We have a photo, Bill,
Okay.
if you'd like to show the photo that we have. There, that's the capsule itself.
No, Earl, this is the launch facility. This is where the missiles are actually located. Can you show the next slide?
I think there's a picture of a gate there.
No,
that's the missile.
Well, that's not the missile.
We're going backward. There we go.
There it is.
There you are.
This is what Oscar Flight looked like in recent times. A man by the name of James Klotz took this photograph. He has been my chief investigator in our efforts to uncover the truth about this incident. At any rate, that's the front gate.
There's another picture there you go, and there's your red chair. We've talked about that before.
Yeah, this is
you used to sit in that.
These were our stations, and directly to the rear, you can see the panel, display panel, And at my station where I normally was, I was the deputy commander normally. I was able to arm the missiles from my location. That blue curtain behind us is where we had a small cot, and we took occasional naps because we were on duty for 24 hours.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's the enclosed capsule. So he was shouting into the phone. I tried to calm him down. Finally said, there's a red-orange, very bright light, sometimes pulsating. I said, well, can you see anything inside the light? And he said, well, I could barely make out an oblong or oval-shaped object in there. However, it's very bright, and he was scared to death, wanted me to tell him what to do next. Well, I reminded him it was his duty to secure the facility upstairs. But I was aware that because he was so frightened, it seemed to me like he was telling me he felt like we were under some sort of an attack. I couldn't argue with that. It felt very stark and real, what he was telling me.
It was an incursion. It was an incursion. And this was, I mean, there's nothing more secured or held in such venerance as our nuclear arsenal. That is, still, what the scenario is in the military. So this was not like some little overflight over a farm or a barnyard or something.
No,
this was a threat in their eyes, national security threat, the greatest that you could have, really.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It was an intrusion in the airspace directly above us, and then he said, "I have to go, sir. One of the guards got injured." I later found out that it was nothing that this object did to injure the guard. It was either some action he took with his rifle that jammed his hand and injured his hand. He got a severe cut in his hand. He had to be taken back to Malmstrom Air Force Base for someone to look at his hand. So, but anyway, he hung up the phone at that point. I went directly to my commander, woke him up, and started to tell him about the phone calls. But then we get this loud horn and go off, and we know what that means. It was something to do with our missiles. So we look at the board, the status board, and sure enough, one of our missiles had just gone off alert. It went from a green status to a red status, or no-go. And very shortly thereafter, all the rest of them went down the same way.
How many? That was 10 missiles, I think, or
yeah, we had control of 10.
Yeah.
So we both get up, we go through our checklists. I noticed that there were two of the sites where we had the incursion lights, which meant someone might have been trying to enter those sites where the missiles were, the launch facilities. I immediately called back upstairs, asked about the object, first of all, and he said it just flew off just as I called. So the object was up there while these missiles were being shut down. I ordered guards to go out to the two sites, the launch facilities where we had the incursion lights. They reported back seeing these objects over those facilities. And again, we're too frightened to go any further. We ordered them back to the Launch Control Center. And at that point, my commander had reported the incident to the command post at Malmstrom. We had a wing command post there, and he turns to me and says the same thing happened at another flight of missiles. Now, I thought he meant that evening because he didn't extrapolate or say any more than that. But later on, of course, in doing my research, I realized that that was the Echo flight incident, and the same type of thing happened, only in that case, UFOs were seen by security guards and maintenance people at two of the launch facilities when the missiles went down there, and the rest of the missiles went down within seconds of each other. So,
was this at the Minot Air?
No.
This is another one. Oh, geez. Wow.
This was still Malmstrom.
Oh, my goodness.
But it was another flight. See, we were broken up into flights of 10 missiles.
Wow.
We had about 15 flights. So we had about, at the time, operational, about 150 missiles. And each missile, of course, was intercontinental nuclear missile. So within the span of 8 days, we lost 20 ICBMs during UFO incursions or UFO incidents. The one you're speaking of, Earl, happened in September of 1966.
Yeah.
So it was about 6 months earlier.
And that was David Schindel was the commanding officer, who I met in Oregon. I had dinner with him and his wife, actually, last year. Yeah, right. Very, very dear guy, or a serious man. Reminds me a little bit of you, which is a compliment. And
yes, and
same thing happened. Something I was okay. I had a misconception of, and you actually corrected me once about this, is that I thought that they used maybe something like an electromagnetic pulse to bring down the missiles, but that isn't the case. You told me that even the oxygen, the radio, computer, all those systems, they were all still online. This was a absolutely just a directed, aimed, targeted thing that happened to the missiles in at your base. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Let me just say, at this point in time, I don't know if the Air Force has determined a specific cause for how these missiles were shut down. However, Boeing, who was investigating these incidents at Echo and Oscar flight, decided to do a bench test on parts of the guidance system because we had a way of querying each missile separately on why they shut down or what was the fault. And they all read back guidance and control system failure. So Boeing took it upon themselves to do bench tests on part of the equipment of the guidance system. And one of those pieces of equipment is called the logic coupler. The logic coupler, think of it as a kind of an interface between the data that we would get after launch, data from gyroscopes, accelerometers, and other instruments that determine how well the missile is flying towards its target. And then it would feed that information into a computer and make any adjustments in the missile flight if it had to, I guess. And the logic coupler was kind of the interface between those two functions. If the logic coupler what Boeing did was a bench test on the logic coupler, and at a particular level of power, let's say, or electrical input, and a particular frequency and a particular time. And I've got all those details. They were able to intermittently recycle or shut down, for temporarily shut down that logic coupler. So they speculated that some external source, they weren't able to find any internal source to our systems. Some external source intermittently shut down that logic coupler, and therefore the missiles could not be guided correctly, and therefore they were shut down automatically. So let's further extrapolate. If these objects, and it seems obvious, these objects would have had to send a signal through 60 feet of earth and concrete, which is where we were, and where the cabling system was. We had about 8 or 9 inch in diameter cables going to each missile separately. Those cables were triply shielded against EMI, or electromagnetic interference, right? So triply shielded. So whatever signal it's sent through 60 feet of earth and concrete, it would have to penetrate that shielding and send a particular signal to a particular piece of hardware on each missile separately. Very quickly, within seconds.
This is 1967.
1967.
Okay, that's one of the, now I've heard people make an excuse, oh, well, this was the Russians, or this was, nobody had this nobody has this technology to do this now, as far as I know. I mean, 60 feet of concrete. I mean, come on, So that's
exactly. And we're so when AARO or anybody else comes out and says that we have no evidence of extraterrestrial craft or high-tech craft, very high-tech craft visiting us, I think we could make a case for saying what you just said. We had no kind of equipment that could hover silently above our facility and send signals that would penetrate 60 feet of earth and concrete, and then penetrate triply shielded cables and send a particular signal to a particular piece of hardware on our guidance system to shut them down. So anyway.
How did people react? Okay, so after this incident, let's talk about your commanding officers and what happened after that. I know what David Schindel was told. He said it never happened, and he was told to repeat that if ever asked. It never happened. But maybe you can talk a little bit about the reaction. And now these missiles were completely taken offline. They had to be pulled out and rewired and stuff, right? I mean, it wasn't an easy fix. It wasn't like they turned them off and they could switch them back on.
No, there was no on-off switch for these missiles. No. But
good.
they were not removed from their silos. We did have targeting crews go out there, and they would have to go through a fairly complex procedure to restart the missiles, which required some actions, but the missiles themselves were never removed from the silos. But they were offline. The next morning, they were still offline, even though we had maintenance people out at the sites working on the missiles. But we were relieved the next morning. And when we left our facility, we were ordered back to a meeting with our squadron commander. So, yes, we reported to our squadron commander, and I knew this gentleman, had spent some time in the officers' club, buying each other drinks for some while. And he told me World War II stories. He was a World War II B-17 pilot, grizzly old guy, as calm and as sharp and as courageous as they come. And I walked into his office that next morning, and he was white as a sheet. And the first thing I asked him was this some sort of Air Force exercise? And he looked at me and said, absolutely not. And I certainly believe him. And in addition, the Air Force, if they were running an exercise, would not be using operational equipment for such an exercise, obviously, because we'd reduce our capability. And this was during the Cold War. But at any rate, we started to go through what had happened, the timeline of what had happened to us. And but before I could start that, he introduced us to a gentleman from AFOSI, captain, who shoved a piece of paper in our faces and said, sign here. What's this? And he said, it's a non-disclosure agreement with severe penalties if you ever speak about this to anyone. And it included your spouse, anyone in the Air Force, or any civilian, or anyone. In fact, in the NDA itself, it had the words Leavenworth Prison.
Oh my God.
So we would have
get your attention.
Right away. Of course, that's a federal prison. And so if we ever talked about this, we'd be on our way to federal prison. I objected because we had above top secret clearances, and I said, we've already got way above top secret. There's no reason to sign another document asking for our non-disclosure. And he said, no, this is a specific document for this specific event. Sign it. Basically, wow. We were ordered to sign it. We didn't get a copy of it. We signed, and then we were dismissed. Now, I found that curious, even at the time, that they didn't even want to discuss with us, what had happened. And later on, I realized the reason they didn't care to discuss it is because it had already happened at another flight. That was the Echo flight incident 8 days earlier.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now you didn't even tell Marilyn, your wife, until you thought that it had become public knowledge. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. I mean, how do you hold on to information like that? I mean, I understand the whole thing with signing NDAs and possibility of prison, losing pensions, and is not even the main worry there. And of course, I mean, my mom had worked in secret projects, and she told me, you know the story. She told me too much when I was 5 years old. I think because she thought I would forget it. She was sure, I was just a baby, is what she said. How did you remember that? Oh my God, you can't ever talk about this again. I could go to prison. That was what I heard. I was 10 years old. I was talking about it at school. So, I mean, this is very serious stuff. So when did you finally tell Marilyn? And maybe you could give us a background of that, because that would be very difficult to not tell your spouse something like that.
Yeah, well, that was difficult. It was also difficult the next morning when these guards that were with me that previous night and had seen the object up close called me at home. I don't know how they got my home phone number, but they called me at home and literally begged me to come out and talk to them, thinking that I could, enlighten them about what the heck was going on. And I had to turn them down. It just killed me, but I had to say, I can't talk to you about it because I've been ordered not to. And that really bothered me, but it became motivation for me later on when I was able to talk to get to the bottom of what had happened. Anyway, so I did not tell my wife, and then that was 1967. So let's go fast forward to 1994. I was at a bookstore at the University of Washington. I was getting out of the FAA, resigning and going into teaching. I wanted to be a teacher. So I signed up at the University of Washington for a master's degree in teaching education. Happened to be in the bookstore and happened to see the title of a book on the shelves called Above Top Secret by Timothy Good.
Timothy Good. Great book. Yeah. I have a copy right behind me here.
Well, if you got a copy, Earl, you can take it down, turn to page 301 of that book, because that's exactly what I did. Believe it or not, I opened up the book and turned to page 301.
Synchronicity.
And on that page is a very short paragraph stating sometime in 1966 and 67, missiles were shut down during UFO incidents while UFOs were overhead. I just was shocked to see that in print because of the NDA I had signed. And so I jumped to the conclusion, of course, that the Air Force must have declassified this incident. Otherwise, how could it possibly be in a book like this available in any bookstore? So the first thing I did is hopped in my car, drove home, and ran in and told my wife about my incident back in 67. And of course, I didn't remember all the details at the time, but I had bought the book, of course, and I pointed to this article and told her this was my incident. And there happened to be a friend of hers there with her who knew about MUFON. And this is where MUFON first came into the picture for me, because I'd never heard of MUFON. And and she said, yeah, they've got investigators that'll help you and everything. So
how about that? That's a meaningful coincidence, which is, that is a synchronicity. That is what synchronicity means, a meaningful coincidence. It seems to happen to us folks a lot. So keep going. Wow. So you immediately MUFON. How cool. I'm happy about that. I got the hat right there. Yeah.
I think it was the next day that I contacted the director of MUFON in that area in the Northwest. I forget her name at this point. I've got it written down somewhere. and she recommended James Klotz to help me investigate. And I said, you know, I'd like to make sure the Air Force has declassified this. And I think she brought up the idea of submitting a FOIA request. And so I told Jim Klotz, help me write this FOIA request, but don't say anything about UFOs because that'll spook them. So he did. He actually wrote the letters to the Air Force, to various Air Force facilities, requesting information, the little information that we had from this one paragraph in the book. He didn't say anything about UFOs, not a word. He just wanted to know more about what the reason was for these missiles shutting down. The Air Force wrote back and said, you know, this is classified. However, because it's been more than 12 years, I think, at the time, we're going to declassify this incident and we'll respond to your FOIA request and send you documents. So they did. They started sending us documents about the Echo flight incident. Now, at that time, I didn't recall which flight I was in when the incident occurred, because I recalled that, you know, I knew Echo was not part of our squadron, but from time to time we would fill in if they ran short of crews and go to different sites. So I didn't exclude the possibility that this is where I was located. And in fact, I thought it was from all the information I had. So as soon as the documents arrived, stamped declassified or unclassified, I started going public. And I started calling people I knew from that time period in the Air Force, trying to figure out who my commander was with me in the capsule when this incident occurred, because I didn't remember his name. I remember this is 27 years later. So eventually, I talked to the commander and the deputy commander of Echo Flight, because the documents we were receiving were all about the Echo Flight incident. And eventually I got a hold of Walter Fiegel, who was, again, like me, he was in charge of the facility when his missiles went down. And he confirmed that there were UFOs hovering over the launch facilities at the time of the missile shutdowns for him. And similar to mine, all 10 of them went down within seconds.
Wow.
Yeah. And I've got him on audio tape. He has never gone public per se. He's never spoken to any government agency about it, like AARO. However, as far as I know, he's still alive, and he could be a witness about the Echo flight incident.
Wow.
I did get a hold of his commander at the time, Eric Carlson. James is his son. At any rate, I've got him in writing, confirming what Walt Fiegel told me in audio. So I've got a couple of audio tapes. If people want to hear those, they can go to my website, spiralgalaxy.org, link to the Malmstrom incidents, and you'll see a whole bunch of evidence, including the audio tape when I spoke with Walter Fiegel. You'll see it on there. You can listen to it.
Now I'm just looking at your book here. There's another document. It was another commanding officer, Colonel Lewis Chase, he wrote about the Malmstrom Air Force Base ICBM shutdown to Ray Fowler, and I get that was another witness to this, or that came forward, or
okay, it's important we bring in Ray Fowler because I
like Ray. I've met him. I'm in touch with him, actually. Yeah,
great guy, and
Still
he's a musician.
Yeah, he sure is.
He's a singer, and anyway, so
good guy.
Ray Fowler, at the time of the Echo and Oscar incidents, worked for Sylvania Corporation, and they had a contract with electrical systems on the Minuteman I. And as such, he had reps at stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base. These were civilian reps who had not only knew about the UFO incidents that shut down our missiles, they knew some details about that, but they also had seen these objects in some way. I think they were somehow in the field and had seen the objects in real time. So they reported back to Ray Fowler, their boss, and told him about what they knew. Fowler was, I think, working with AFRO. Is it
APRO? I think
APRO. I'm sorry. I think he was interested in the subject of UFOs, and with APRO.
I think it was Hynek's group, APRO, wasn't it? Yeah.
Could have been
golden age stuff there.
And so he contacted the Condon investigator. At that time, as you probably know, the Condon Committee was investigating UFOs for the Air Force under contract.
Grudge. It's a grudge report. Aptly titled, I guess.
No.
Blue Book.
You're thinking of Project Blue Book. No. In 1966, the U.S. Air Force awarded a contract to the University of Colorado, where Edward Condon worked as a physics teacher, instructor, and he was asked to get a group together to investigate UFO sightings over U.S. Air Force military facilities. It was supposed to be a so-called scientific investigation, but it wasn't. I go into great detail on this subject, this connection, in my latest book, UAPs and the Nuclear Puzzle. But Ray Fowler made contact with Condon's chief investigator, a man by the name of Roy Craig, and told him about what he had heard from his people at Malmstrom. And he said, "You ought to check into this, Mr. Craig." And he did. So this communication happened with Roy Craig. I think it was in August of '67, not too long after the incident. And then Craig decided to visit Malmstrom Air Force Base to do some look-see investigation on these incidents. He had names of the witnesses that worked for Ray Fowler, etc. And so he confronted the man you just mentioned, Lieutenant Colonel Lewis Chase, who was base operations officer at Malmstrom Air Force Base. Now, this gets a little complex, but I'll continue.
We're going to have to break in just a second here.
Well, at any rate,
just for station identification.
All right, but real quick.
Do it in a minute.
In a minute. So he confronts Lieutenant Colonel Chase, who was base UFO officer. Now, he got that title as base UFO officer. This is Colonel Chase, because he was appointed by some general in Washington to work with the Condon investigators investigating UFO sightings over Air Force bases. So he confronted him. So Chase should have known about these incidents. And he, in fact, I can show that he did know. But Chase backpedaled, said, I don't know anything about it. Told that to Craig, and basically stonewalled him. And I can finish the rest of it later. But
you know, I think we have 1 minute left, so you can keep going for a couple.
All right, I want to close the loop on how these incidents got into above top secret. What happened was the Condon investigators dropped the ball on those incidents, Oscar and Echo at Malmstrom. They did not pursue it, even though they had names, people to talk to. They never did talk to any of them. So when the final Condon report came out, it was void of the Malmstrom incidents. It said nothing about it. Ray Fowler got angry. He got mad, and he about a year or two later, he gave an interview to the Christian Science Monitor. I think that was 1973. The Monitor published an article about the Malmstrom incidents.
Wow.
And that is where Timothy Good got his information to include into that book. But it had not been declassified when Ray Fowler talked to the Christian Science Monitor. And he was ordered by his boss not to talk about it. But of course, he was civilian. But he was so angry about it and wanted the public to know that Ray Fowler gave that interview to the Christian Science Monitor. That's how it got into above top secret, and that's how I was able to read it in that book. But it was not declassified when it was put into that book.
Wow. Okay. So it pried it out of their hands pretty much. We'll be back in just a minute. We have to break for station break, and we'll see you guys on the other side of that. Welcome back. Oh goodness, we have a special guest with us along with Robert. This is Marilyn South. How are you doing, Marilyn?
I'm doing fine. Thank you very much, Earl. It is an honor to be here to talk about things.
We have lots of things.
Yeah.
So now Bob told me that he finally got to tell you about what happened. They'd been sitting on that secret all those years. How did that make you feel? I don't think I've ever asked you that. I mean, it's quite I mean, did you have any knowledge of UFOs before that? Did you what was that like?
E.T. movies, maybe. Other than that,
yeah.
No, it was not part of a serious reality in my life. And in fact, I remember questioning, we lived over in Indonesia for a couple of years in Jakarta, and I met a yoga teacher over there. And I remember asking him, that was around 1991-ish, late 91, or I met him in early 93, actually. And I asked him, you know, whether he believed that there was life elsewhere. And without hesitation, he said yes. So that sort of opened the door for me a little bit. But Bobby and I were married for 25 years before he told me about his UFO incident.
Wow.
And I believed him from the get-go because I know my husband, and I know that he would not lie about something like that. So I have been in support of him ever since I heard that story in 1994. So 25 years of marriage, and then he finally tells me. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. and now just kind of to just sort of put a nice bow on all of this, Bob. Yeah. So, looking back at the way that the Air Force has dealt with this phenomenon, it's interesting. I have a pillow behind my back. It actually has the Roswell Daily Record story on it. I know. I have a friend over at the paper that I got that from. But they put out, this is 1947. That the U.S. Air Force has captured a flying saucer, and then of course everything was shut down. I mean, down to the newspaper over the the little of course we didn't have emails or faxes yet, but they had the little machine that they would do messages with, and it was like stop the story, stop the presses, and they. I'm dear friends with Denise Marcel, so I've heard the whole story from her side about Roswell and the whole crash and all that it was indeed an incident. Her grandfather, again, people, we've heard, I think, 5 different excuses now that were supposedly official. Now, this is the official story now. It was a mogul balloon, right? And supposedly this officer of security of America's only atomic base at the time, it was above top secret. Talk about above top secret. This was the most important Air Force base in the world at that point. It's where they sent the Enola Gay out from to to end World War II, and he was the head of security there. And they sent him out to the MacBrazel Ranch, and he saw that debris field where it, you could see where this thing came in and crashed. And the debris, I heard, was moving around like it was alive still. There was something very strange about it. They tried, to take blow torches to it, shot bullets at it, but it was lighter than tinfoil, and yet it could repel bullets. It wouldn't. You couldn't bother it with a blowtorch, and there's this debris field, and they took him out there and had him pose with you can see the package that it came in the photograph, and we've all seen that photograph where he just like his expression on his face is, "You've got to be kidding me." He had to tell the American public that he couldn't tell the difference between a silly weather balloon and a spacecraft.
Right.
But that was the excuse that they used. Now, Ruppelt and the early people that were reporting on UFOs seemed to be some transparency, but something happened. Something happened in the years there. It seemed like the doors really shut. The second day after Roswell happened. They pulled all this back. They decided that the American public didn't deserve to know that we're not alone in the universe, which is, I call it the trifecta of important subjects. What is there a God? What happens when we die? And are we alone in the universe? And that's one of the pillars. And one of the main questions, the philosophical, religious, and everything else. They pulled that back. They blamed it on a silly weather balloon, and made Jesse Marcel look silly posing with that thing.
Yeah, stooping down on the ground and looking at that balloon. Yeah, it was
just horrible. But something happened there, Now I know that my mom, when I asked her, I was old enough to ask her, why the hell don't they come forward with this knowledge? It's important, and I mentioned those 3 things to her, that is there a God? What happens when we die? And are we alone in the universe? And the excuse that she gave me it sounded like she was repeating a little litany that was given to her. That, she brought up the radio broadcast that Orson Welles did of War in the Worlds, and that people reacted badly. She said, now imagine if people reacted badly worldwide. She mentioned it could harm world religions, and it could, harm the banking system. And that was the excuse that she gave me. And I keep hearing that same litany,
The truth didn't matter at that point. They were trying to people from losing it and going crazy.
Now, it seems like Vandenberg kind of had a hand in this process. Would you say that, Bob? I mean, we can kind of see the people that shut this down and decided that you know, this the American public should know.
Yeah, I think it was General Vandenberg that I think it was Blue Book that suggested he was chief of the Air Force at the time, suggested that they give a briefing to him on what they had discovered up to that point. This was around 1948. And anyway, they did give him a presentation called the Estimate of the Situation, right?
Yeah, right.
And the conclusion
was Ruppelt that wrote that, correct? Yeah.
No, Ruppelt came in later. I don't know who the people were that briefed him, but their conclusion was that these were extraterrestrial craft because they could not correlate the results of the sightings with any known craft by friend or foe in this world. And so that's how they came to that conclusion. Vandenberg, for whatever reason, was not impressed with that conclusion. He wasn't impressed with the evidence they presented, which was plenty of evidence from pilot reports going back who knows how far. And he shut it down. He said, now come back when you've got real good evidence that you can show me. So after that, because of course, as you in the military, you want to keep impressing your superiors, right? If you want to get anywhere in rank. And so this kind of put a chill within Blue Book. It wasn't called Blue Book at the time. It was called Project Sign. But after this presentation, which was rejected by the Chief of the Air Force, it became Project Grudge. And
appropriate
clearly
name
they wanted the details of these sightings to be hushed up and disinform the public on the possibility of that these were anything but swamp gas, etc.
Yeah, poor Hynek. He was kind of told to call it swamp gas, is what I've been told, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back there, because he got the public reaction was not kind to Dr. Hynek. And there were cartoons that were making fun of him personally, and newspaper articles. And that was when he finally decided, you know what, I'm tired of towing these guys a line. I'm just going to be honest from here on out. That there is a there, and this is a thing, and it's not just atmospheric, misidentified atmospheric phenomena, etc. There's something here. And it seems like a lot of us go through that little arc. I mean, for me, my mom told me that this was real when I was a kid. She was an officialdom, and her story. She also worked under the ground. She said it was a mile under, the facility that she worked in, and that, we were not alone, and Star Wars wasn't far-fetched. Mm-hmm. But she certainly didn't go public with that. And even me talking at school about it, she had that big old conversation with me. I could wind up in prison. You can't talk about this. So I didn't. But I would keep trying to get her to talk.
You don't want to lose your mommy at 5 years old.
No. And everybody loved my mom. And I actually had somebody from the DOD tell me, I'm not going to mention names, but he said something to the effect of that, I've read your mother's file. It's like, really? There's a file? Of course there's a file. And I just want you to know she didn't lie to you. And so you gave like a little speech in front of your grade school, didn't you, when you were about 10 or something? And did you know your mom reported on herself because she was concerned that we would hear about it from other sources, and she wanted to make sure that, and she told me, I wasn't supposed to tell you this. I thought that you were young enough that you would forget it. And I guess that it weighed on her so much that she couldn't she couldn't live with that information. So when I hear about you holding this, for that 25 years, that secret, it's such a deep secret that you had to keep it from your dearest, beloved partner. That's what comes to mind. My mom couldn't sit on it either. And I think she probably told my dad, but he was very religious, and he would, if she would even mention the subject, he would roll his eyes and walk out of the room. He didn't want to hear it. Right, but her best friend we called Aunt Ellen, and she worked at the Rand Corporation while my mom worked at Hughes. And she knew. She knew all about that stuff. But now, so after all this stuff happened, and now, and we talked about how your commanding officers in the Air Force reacted, and what they went public with, which was nothing. It was absolutely nothing. They weather balloon. So looking at the years, all these years that have gone by, and the different excuses that we've gotten, that they've given us, why this isn't a real phenomenon, and why objects that travel Mach 18 and make 120-degree turns on a dime are maybe Chinese drones, which I don't think anybody has anything that can do that. Transmedium flight, water to air to space. And we see that, I get reports from military, from commercial pilots. I had a commercial pilot report that from Catalina Island, that he and his wife saw a 300-foot sphere that was gold and self-illuminated come out of the ocean. And it did this crosswise dance. It hung there in the air. There were 3 pair of eyes on this thing. His wife and his brother-in-law were watching it. And the pilot, we trust our lives into his hands. He travels that route along Southern California, the coastal route. So he was able to give me coordinates where he saw all this. And it shot up, this thing, it split into 2, and then they shot off into low Earth orbit and probably somewhere else. But they're still saying that there's no evidence. There's no evidence at all for this phenomenon. And so Bob, this leads me to bring up the AARO, the congressional hearings. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that. Maybe the first one where, let's talk about that one, where you and David Schindel went and gave testimony. I know that I've read David Schindel's written testimony. He sent me a copy of it, what he gave them. I mean, it was the same story you're telling me, except it happened over at Minot Base the year before. Right. Let's talk a little bit. How much do you like that Kirkpatrick guy? You can... I'll just let you go.
We don't want to get into that.
Don't get into trouble, but
No.
Yes, AARO did contact me for an interview for their historical research on this subject, and I gave them a 2.5-hour interview in February 15th, 2023. I thought it was going to be an interview in a secure setting like a skiff, but no, they just decided to give me a phone call and interview me over the phone. So, in fact,
in this room,
this beautiful lady
really
was in the same room when I gave that interview,
and they didn't even ask if there was anyone present at all.
Jeez.
Wow. And by the way, I told AARO before I started that I was going to tape record the entire interview, which I did. They
Oh.
did not. They did not object. They did not object. At any rate, 2.5 hours. I gave them PowerPoint. And in that PowerPoint, I presented some 22 documents in support of what I was telling them. So I gave them all that material later on. I sent it to them at their request. And then in later correspondence, they told me I did a great job, and that my interview was now an official historical record, their historical record on the UAP subject. Now, why they haven't reported that to the Congress, I don't know, but they haven't apparently in the two status reports that AARO has given the Congress. I don't know that they've identified my interview or that of David Shendelly. David Shendelly also presented to AARO, and so, as you said, and so did Robert Jacobs. His story was, most people are familiar with it. Well, he was at Vandenberg Air Force Base with some very sophisticated video equipment. Was able to video record a UFO flying circles around a dummy warhead that had been released from an Atlas missile in 1962. But at any rate, if anybody wants to see any of those reports, my own Shendelly and Jacobs, they can go to my YouTube page, Bob Salas YouTube page, and they will see a presentation we gave at the National Press Club in, I think it was 2019.
I think so, something.
There's a film too, UFOs and Nukes, as well as a book, right? That was Bob
David
Jacobs.
Shendelly, wrote a book. He also wrote a book.
Oh, I have that. Yeah. It never happened. I think that's the name of his book.
Right, right.
Oh, thank you, Bill. There we go. I have a great
one
producer.
other remark on after Bob finished talking with the two officers there at the AARO office. When they responded to him, they actually called him a patriot for giving his story.
He is.
Yeah.
And we thank you for your service.
Coming from them, that, that just meant an incredible, like they really did believe him. And yet AARO turns around or Kirkpatrick anyway, and basically there wasn't really anything of any significance in the reports.
Yeah. What did he say, Bob? He said that there was no convincing evidence.
No evidence of extraterrestrial craft visiting Earth. Something like that. But that's ridiculous. Well, I just told you my story. So
yeah. And what shoots down a missile in 1962? And I heard I know that story. It was a disc-shaped object with a little cupola on top. They had film of it. They took him into a secured, I guess it was a skiff, and they showed him the film. And they asked him if you guys were doing something funny down there. Like, I don't know what they thought that he might have been doing, to make even a mock ICBM disabled. But I mean, now what do you think that our visitors are telling us? What does this mean to you? They shut down missiles, and there is a report from Russia that they actually put missiles on launch mode and then shut them down. That came out, when the Soviet Union fell. So this is worldwide, not just here. How would you interpret this message?
Well, I'll use some words that I didn't use when I spoke with Nancy Mace. But,
oh yeah, I was going to ask you about Nancy Mace next.
Yeah. All right. Anyway,
I'll let you just talk.
I'm convinced that because there have been so many of these incidents, not just missile shutdowns, but UFOs flying over nuclear weapons facilities and bases, that they were simply sending us a message. They could have done damage to our missiles, our nuclear missiles. They could have, but they did not. None of the missiles that we're talking about here were ever damaged. So what they were doing was simply sending us a message about the complete stupidity, foolishness, whatever word you want to use, of having these weapons in the first place and having them ready to launch, ready to operate in a war that would only end in the annihilation of every living thing on Earth.
MAD, mutually assured destruction. That's the official term for it.
That's correct. Yeah.
Excuse me for interrupting, but the thing that amazes me is the amount of stockpile that this country has in other countries. Like, I don't know how many it would actually take to destroy this planet, but it sounds like they've got enough to destroy it multiple times.
Yeah.
So
they'd be blowing up wreckage, you know. They would be blowing up the wreckage. I mean, they talk about go back to the Stone Age. It would be, you know, worse than that.
Right.
It seems to me like there's concern. I mean, you know, the film "The Earth the Day Stood Still" comes to mind. But I think that rather than sending Gort and the flying saucer to land in Central Park or wherever it was in that film, that they're sending people like you and David Schindler and you know, all the people that are coming forward, and because there really is nobody else with as much. I think I mean, we all honor your service, but as well as David's and the people that were in your position. You guys were like the top of the top in the creme de la creme during, you know, the Cold War, which was scary. I remember duck and cover. You know, I was going to grade school back then, and we would do those drills, you know, and I don't think that desk that I was hiding under and going into a little cannonball under was going to protect me from nuclear explosions. So, I mean, this has been going on for a long, long time. There are still incursions on our military bases. I can tell you that. I get them all the time. You know, I had a guy over at over at the major Marine base that's near here. I probably shouldn't mention names and stuff, to where he was taken.
El Toro?
Well,
El Toro?
No, it was a bigger one than that, but I don't want to mention names, but he was taken up through the rafters of his barracks, out of his rack, and taken to low Earth orbit and shown possible bad futures that we could go through.
Oh.
And at first he was reacting like a soldier. He was angry. He was trying to hit these beings, you know, that had abducted him, but they didn't do anything bad to him. They showed him what horrible things could happen. And finally, when he calmed down and he started like showing remorse and grief, and he started praying, actually, they sent him back. and his friend found him in the barracks, you know, kind of huddled up and shaking. Same thing happened to a guy. I had another case where we had a Navy pilot who was on a destroyer that was going from Japan to Guam, I believe it was. And it was his 21st birthday. He was bored. He was lying in his rack reading something, and the same thing happened. It wasn't sleep paralysis. He wasn't asleep yet. He wasn't drinking. He wasn't, you know, he was in the middle of the ocean. And he was taken physically, he said. He could feel the decks that he was going through up to low Earth orbit. And these two beings that just looked like beings of light started showing him these possible futures. It was like, you know, Charles Dickens, you know, The Ghost of Christmas Future.
Yeah.
And he was horrified. Yeah. And again, you know, he came back a changed man. Yeah. And I hear these stories over and over again, and I try to promote them. You know, I do write an article in a periodical in the UK, Outer Limits magazine, and I share these case reports that I get. But time and time and time again, it's the same story, that people that are in the military are shown, you know, what could happen and what they can do, you know, our visitors themselves. But I think they want us to change. You know, people will say, well, how come they don't just, you know, land on the White House lawn? Well, apparently there's a, you know, shoot them down order in the military as far as UFOs go.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the day the Earth stood still, because that is a very, I think, an important movie. But one of the premises of that movie was that it is up to you Earthlings or humans to take care of what you're doing. In other words, you're always fighting wars, continual one war after another. And now you've got these nuclear weapons that'll destroy the planet, every living thing on it. You've got to be responsible for that. Yeah. You've got to be responsible for your planet. Otherwise, why would any extraterrestrial civilization want to, you know, meet you or work with you or deal with you if you're going to be this type of civilization that is constantly at war,
violence,
with very, very dangerous weapons.
Yeah.
And I think that was another message of that movie. It is up to you Earthlings to take care of these problems that you have created for yourselves.
Yes.
And us. You know.
I agree. I've come to the conclusion that there's something like the Prime Directive out there, to where, I mean, they're waiting for us to become space worthy. And right now, and I say this a lot, you know, people, you know, probably have heard me say this before, that they want Star Trek, but they're afraid that if they let us out there, that we would do Star Wars. They look at our history. They probably watch our TV shows, which I can barely watch anymore because everything is just violent and, you know, people harming others, you know. Yeah. And I think that they're waiting for some change, a sea change. And I think that this phenomenon, it is what is going to do that. When people realize that we're being observed, that we're maybe being judged, and that our future depends on it. Do we want to live in a zoo, you know, or do we want to be allowed out there to become, you know, part of this galactic community? Exactly. And I think that it's up to us. I think it's up to us and what we do with this.
Let's move just a little further with this conversation.
Yes.
And we'll do a what if, okay? What if Congress invited myself, David Schindele, Bob Jameson,
hallelujah,
to testify publicly under oath on national television so the public could hear our testimonies, uncensored, right? And unencumbered with NDAs, or don't talk about it. Wouldn't that have a positive effect on spreading this idea that let's take responsibility for these nuclear weapons and get rid of them? Let's all work together on this planet to get rid of all nuclear weapons and the ability to build them. And that's not that's not out of the realm of possibility. We can do that if we make the effort.
Yep, I agree. I absolutely agree. I think that's the message. That's the way I interpret it. And I think that
really does need to hear directly from people like my husband who have had direct experiences instead of people. I mean, everybody has some input that's worthy, I'm sure. but they really do need to focus on people with actual experiences. And I think that would make an impact. And I know this is supposed to be the planet of free choice and blah, blah, blah. And I think that that could be the reason that there's not more interaction by the aliens, the ETs, is that I believe that they want us to perform better and make those choices on our own. And so far,
same page, Marilyn.
Same page, great, yeah. But no,
which leads me to this beautiful segue to where I kind of wanted to lead this conversation. So now we've been talking about incursions on military bases. We've been talking about nuts and bolts UFOs, turning off nuts and bolts missiles and all the above. But the big elephant in the room, and that which I don't think Congress really wants to talk about, except maybe in a fear factor way, is personal contact. Now, both you and Bob, you guys, Bob went public that you had an incursion into your home, that you met our visitors, and I've done that as well. I mean, it was very difficult to decide to come forward with that information, and I had people that rolled their eyes and questioned me and questioned my sanity, my veracity. What drug were you on? All the above. But that changed my life, because before that happened, I thought of this phenomenon as something that was out there. And it's in here, and it can come into your own room. It's a personal phenomenon.
It really is.
It's not some distant thing. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that if you're comfortable talking about it. I'll talk about my own if you want, but I would like to hear your.
Yeah, that's
how did that happen and what happened?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, when Bob first wrote in his second book about his experience, at the time I thought, are you doing the right thing here?
Yeah, I was asked the same question by people. Yeah,
I was concerned whether people would think he was, not really with it. And so where did that put his original story experience about what happened at Malmstrom Air Force Base?
Yeah.
But as it's turned out, he had more wisdom about it than I did at the time. It was the right thing to do, because people, credible people like you and like Bob, need to come out and make this public, because so many people, even people who are not really quite sure about the whole UFO question because they haven't seen one, it just puts it in that same category. If they haven't had a personal experience, then they think, you're nuts.
Yeah.
But many people like myself have had marks left on their body. And besides seeing, our first experience was in Manhattan Beach when we lived there, and saw this.
A hot spot. That's like right between Catalina Island and Manhattan Beach is where they saw the Tic Tac the first time.
Yeah,
I have the coordinates.
I don't doubt that. But at the time, of course, this was 1985, and of course, Bob didn't tell me about his story until 1994. So that was quite a bit later. So I had no idea to associate this strange light, bluish gray light in the hallway. It filled the whole hallway. And I was like the typical ostrich, and, just turned over and pulled the pillow over my head. This will go away. And see, we have.
I tried, but I couldn't move when it happened to me. I couldn't move my arms. But I've seen the blue light. Yep.
We have two slightly different stories.
We have two slightly different stories.
Should I tell mine first?
Keep going.
You tell yours.
Well, I mean,
I think she started, so we'll let Marilyn finish, and then you. Ladies first.
Memory of what happened to him that night, but for me, I just, like I said, I turned over in bed. I didn't try to wake him up. And I just wanted to go to sleep because I had no idea. I couldn't make any sense why that light was there. And I guess I was a little in fear, maybe, that I didn't want to find out what was causing that light to happen. So I just go to sleep. We did not talk about that until when we were in
2012, maybe 2011.
Well, it was about 23 years later when we were in Ireland. And a speaker there was giving a talk about their experience with contact with ETs, and that there was this blue light that was associated with it. And Bob and I were sitting next to each other at the conference, and he turns to me and he said, "Do you remember seeing a blue light?" And that is the first time we talked about it. It was, you know, it was why. I mean, you hear stories like this, and people, their memories being erased, and I can understand, you know, why some of it is, but the fact that nothing bad happened to me that night, it was just seeing this light, and why wouldn't I even mention it to him the next day? And of course, you know, he has his story. Go ahead, Hank.
Your turn, Bob.
Your turn.
All right. So I remember the house because I was remodeling houses in Manhattan Beach and selling them, and remodeling the next and selling it. But I remember this particular house. It was 1985 when this occurred. I can't tell you which month, but I woke up one evening. Marilyn was with me, and we had two small children in the house. They were very young. And I woke up and saw a blue light emanating from our living room, which was the next room over, but we had the door open.
It was a long hallway.
Long hallway, and this blue light was shining through, and I woke Marilyn. I remember waking her and said, "You see the blue light?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, I've got to get up because there might be someone in the house." So, because we didn't have a blue light. So
yeah, no.
I started to get up, and I was paralyzed. I could not move. And I tried. I was kicking, or trying to kick, and trying to move my arms and legs, my body. I could not move, period. And I was struggling. And at one point, I shouted out to Marilyn and asked for help. But now, looking over at her, she was unconscious. Or maybe she had that pillow over her head. I don't know.
I was unavailable.
But she was unavailable, and she couldn't have helped me anyway because I couldn't move. And next thing I noticed is a figure in the doorway. Now, all I recall about this figure in the doorway was it had a hood on. Now, and I couldn't see the face. It was almost like it was black here with a hood, but it definitely looked like some sort of person or figure. And that was a little frightening. And then the next thing I know, I'm sense that there are small people in the room, small beings. And again, I don't remember what they look like at that point. All I'm telling you here is what I've recovered from 4 regression sessions that I've had, hypnotic regression. The next thing that happened, they lifted these small, I thought they were children. They were smallish. They lifted me off the bed and floated me towards the bedroom window. And which I had locked. I remember locking it that night. And I was thinking to myself, you know, they can't even reach the latch to unlock it, you know. But I guess that didn't worry them. They took me right through the window. And again, this sounds ridiculous, but that's what happened.
But they do it.
Yeah.
No broken glass, just right through the window.
Wow.
On the heels of that, I'd like to share a couple of experiences
Well,
Oh, you're not finished.
I'm not finished. So next thing, I see a light outside. This was the backyard. And after that, the next thing I recall is these long, bony fingers holding a long needle, placing it right in front of my eyes. And I get this message that they're going to insert this needle into my groin area and that it would not hurt. Well, that didn't sound right to me, but anyway. They began their procedure, whatever it was, and it hurt like hell. I mean, it was
they screw up sometimes. They're not God. They're high tech.
Extreme pain, very extreme pain. I remember how horrible that pain was. It was the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. And when I guess I must have been speaking to him telepathically. I said, this really hurts. And the next thing I know, the pain is dissipated or disappeared. So almost immediately, the pain went away. After that, I was sat up on the table, and I was escorted off the table by these two gray beings, I guess, over to a seating that seemed to be a molded seat inside the craft. It was molded into the side of the craft. Sat down there for a while, and then they escorted me to another cubicle where there was another being. He turned me around and just simply poked two fingers down my spine like this. Turned me back around, escorted out, and we were floating the whole time. I was never walking. I was always floating along a curved corridor, bright light. I'm back in my bed. And the next morning, like Marilyn said, we didn't talk about this because we didn't remember it. I had no memories of that until some 20 some years later. We were in Ireland, and again, listening to a lady who had been abducted, who had been enveloped in blue light during her abduction. And I turned to Marilyn and said, do you remember that blue light in our bedroom?
And immediately I knew what he was talking about.
And she said yes, immediately.
Immediately.
She didn't even hesitate. She said yes. I said, well, that did it for me. It convinced me that really did happen.
That opened up doors, Earl.
And that night, that very night, Mary Rodwell happened to be speaking there. And Mary Rockwell gave me my first hypnotic regression.
It's a good person to have do it. Wow.
Yeah. And that's when I first got some of the details I just talked about.
Wow. Now I hear the same story. I have the same story, and my wife does. Lisa doesn't want to remember much of it, and she didn't remember anything except for the blue light. Now she remembered that. And it happened 10 years ago for us. I had never seen a UFO. I just had my mom's stories that when she died, I joined MUFON because my mom wouldn't be able to answer any more questions for me, you know. And there was always the possibility that she would give me the gold ticket, you know. She never did. She never denied what she told me. And she even confirmed her, you know, her work in the DUM, you know, a deep underground military base. The acronym is a DUM. There's nothing dumb about it. You know, everybody, we have them. Russia has them. China has them. But she was gone. And so I threw myself at this phenomenon. And I was in my 50s because I decided, you know, for myself, I need to understand this in my lifetime. If it doesn't come out to the public, at least I need to understand. I'm you know, looking for my mom, you know, that's what I was looking for. Because she continued working in aerospace. She tried to be a housewife. She was miserable. And in the mid-70s, she went back as a corporate headhunter for all the major corporations in aerospace. And that's what she did till she died. And but anyway, we have the same story as you guys. The blue light filled our room. It was not in a rural area. We lived off the Chandler bike path in Burbank, I mean, it's a very populated area. And there's no room to park a spaceship in our backyard, but somehow or another, they opened up some kind of a portal or a doorway into our place, and I saw them come in. Lisa thought that I was crazy. The first night that it happened, it was 10 years ago. I have the date written down. She thought, she was laughing at me. She was going, "Oh my God, you joined this crazy UFO group. Is this what I have to look forward to?" 2 nights later, she's shaking me and she's pacing next to the bed, and the room is still filled with this blue light. And Lisa's comment to me was, "Oh my God, Earl, you need to tell your little friends," and those were the words, "your little friends," and described them to her, "that they need to leave us the hell alone. I didn't sign up for this."
But you did.
Yeah, I know. And 2 nights after that, both of us woke up to the blue glow in our room again. And this time we had the spotlight effect on our backyard, and it was lit up like high noon in our backyard. There was something over our house that was shining this light down. And we both had telepathic message from whoever was in that craft. They told us a lie, or maybe it was a joke, a cosmic joke, or maybe it was just a bad excuse for what, we'll give them some excuse to blame it on. But we both heard in our heads at the same time, "Don't worry, it's just the neighbor's porch light." And Lisa and I cracked up. And we both said at the same time, "That's no porch light,
It's official.
Now Lisa forgot. Okay, she forgot all this for 10 years, but our mutual friend Steve Neal did a CGI little film. It's just 13 minutes. You can go to Breaking the Silence and watch it on YouTube. And he did the CGI. And the last night, Lisa's watching that on our TV, and she's like, her mouth dropped, and she said, "Oh my God, this happened. Earl, this happened." And she's like, "Shake me again, how could I forget? But this happened." She doesn't want to remember the beings, She apparently had a contact episode with them too on that second night. But so the blue light, it's like we've all seen that, this incursion into our rooms, and it's not random. I think that they are picking people that have stories to tell. For me, it's my mom's story. For Bob, obviously, it's his story, and maybe this is how disclosure happens. I don't think the government's going to do due diligence on it. I mean, they may try, but I think they're going to get it's all threat assessment for them, and it's all in the hands of the military industrials, But this is disclosure right now. For everybody watching this, you ask if disclosure is going to happen. What more do people want? What more is there to tell,
Yeah, having been through several experiences over the past, since 1985, I advise people when they wake up the next morning and they see marks on their body that they didn't know how they got there, that there might have been something happened that night.
Yep.
And so, and not to discount it, because I've talked to other people before, and the triangular puncture mark seems to be pretty common with people who have been, if you want to say, abducted or, visited, or however you want to word it. But I had that one when I had a visit, and took pictures of it. And so, I just want people to know, if they notice something strange,
take a photo.
Yeah, take a photo, right, and then
go to MUFON.com and fill out it. There's 2 buttons at MUFON's website. One, report a UFO. The other one is report a being or an abduction. And if this sounds familiar to you guys out there, hit that second button, and somebody like myself, I'll get your case, or whatever state you're in, there's somebody like me. Or if you're in another country, we're worldwide now, and we're not judgmental. We will listen to you and take you seriously.
Yeah.
And that's what to do. You know, AARO said, you know, to recently to go and report your UFO sightings to them, and I would say no. Don't report it to the government. Okay,
And
they're the
not
guys that
like
have
they
shut the
handled-
door on this stuff.
The way they've handled reports so far about the
Oh my God.
people like my husband.
Well, I know I mean, that's what made me angry was that Kirkpatrick, after everything, after receiving Bob and David's testimony, said there's nothing to see here.
There's nothing to see.
But now,
how dare they?
Bob is saying that he is willing to do this under oath in front of Congress, and I think that that's what they need. This is the next thing that needs to happen.
Right.
If there is to be official disclosure.
I
Bob
really
is your guy. I had to point the right way. My camera is backwards here.
I really do think that it is going to be more of a public swell of interest and storytelling, not stories like made up stories. I'm talking about events that happen to people and share and let
accounts
people know. Because this way, you know, we know if somebody has a similar experience, they're going to find it difficult to discount it as, you know, oh, that, you know, I don't know how I got that bruise or how that happened or whatever, and begin to start, you know, putting the puzzle pieces together. The other thing that I want to say, that night when I had the visit, what I call the tall white, and I call it she because it had a feminine energy about her, and she was completely bald, powder white skin, smaller eyes than the gray ETs, but a very loving presence. And I want to emphasize that it was a very loving presence. And she took me by the hand and took me out through, I don't know if it was the wall, the ceiling, a portal. I have no idea. All I know is that when I was taken through whatever it was, my whole vision screen in my dream state was this shattering of light coming from the center, like something was being broken. And I've never heard anybody else share that story, but I don't hear a lot of ET stories, but I will never forget that one. And then the next morning, you know, that's when I saw the 3 puncture marks on my wrist. And then there were like red marks on my upper arm, well, these were this restraining marks. That was another occasion I had long scratch.
So you guys, we could talk another hour at least, or 2 more, but we have 2 minutes left. So is there any websites, or where can people find you, Bob, and you as well, Marilyn? Leave Marilyn enough time where she can, you know.
Yeah, that's my main website, spiralgalaxy.org. And if they want information on the Malmstrom incidents, they can link to Malmstrom, and they'll see much of my evidence. I've got a lot of video. Some of it I did myself, but like I said, the presentation I gave at the National Press Club, I think multiple times, is on my YouTube page, Bob Salas. They can go there also.
Beautiful.
And if you want to order any of my books, you can go to Amazon.com. And I've got 3 books there they can look for.
He's been busy.
He has been busy. UAPs and the Nuclear Puzzle by Robert Salas. And you guys, what a blessing, what a wonder to have you on my show. And I thank you for your service, Bob, and thank you for your service, Marilyn. I love these guys, and we'll have you back. This isn't the last time that you'll be on here. There's always more to talk about.
There's a lot more to tell.
Oh yeah. We've just touched. It's like tip of the iceberg stuff here.
Okay.
So, well, thank you, you guys, and you guys have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
And
And to Lisa.
I'll talk to you soon. I'll see you soon. We'll have to do lunch again soon. That was fun.
Take care.